So I don't know how to change it to get me flipped the right way. It got me upside down.
Good evening. How's everybody? Everybody having a good week?
Better.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Good.
Anybody still have, what is it, the 12th? Nobody's got students now, I'm sure. They're all gone. I see all you smiling faces.
I've been visiting summer camp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been getting to see him during summer school.
All that. Summer school is good administrative experience. That's good practice. Get some good hours and get some good experience, especially running schedules, putting together schedules, those kinds of things. Of course, I don't know. I don't think you have to mount bus routes like you used to. I think they do that at the bus garage. You used to have to do that.
No, I was going to say Gaston County still has to map out their bus routes. That's a conversation that, we were having.
Yeah, yeah.
We're lucky. We just tossed the list over the fence and the bus office figures it out. But our challenge has been the students have not listened to what bus they are supposed to be on in the morning, in the afternoon, and then explaining to them, no, you can't just walk home because you feel like it.
A student not listening, I don't believe it.
No, never happens.
Never happens.
The kids who are in summer school.
I mean, for summer school kids, understanding your clientele is a big part of summer school. I mean, you really have to schedule it well, and everything has to be well organized, because A, they don't follow directions well, and B, they don't want to follow directions well. Summer school is very good experience because it's the worst case scenario. I hate to say that, but it's just the truth. It's the worst case scenario. And you realize if you've got any holes in your plans, they'll find them. That bunch will. I can tell you that right now. That they'll road test them. They'll field test you, all your plans and schedules for you in summer school. That is the truth. And so that's why it's such good experience. But usually it's because you have lower numbers and you can, it's not like the regular year. There's not as many eyes on you, and you can make a mistake or two in summer school. It's not the end of the world. It's not like the regular year. And it's a good learning experience. Well, I see it's 6 o'clock. We better get started. So, stars of the week. Let's see what I have this week. So let me share my screen, and we'll look at what we had a couple of activities here. So for this past week was our intervention IEP, and for this week it was cyberbullying. And so here are some things that I saw. Mary caught my eye with the notion that teachers cannot refer students for intervention the first 9 weeks of school. All right. That's a good that's a good catch there, Mary. All right. Tell me why though. Why can't you refer kids the first 9 weeks of school?
Well, my district feels that it will take you about a whole 9 weeks to know your student's abilities. Unless the student has been referred the previous year or paperwork has been started the previous school term. But if you're getting a kid for the first time in August, they said that it's unlikely that you're going to know a student's full ability and have diagnostic data to support the fact that a student may have a discrepancy or a learning disability. So they have said that if you notice that there are some discrepancies or disabilities, then you are to begin intervention to show that you have been doing something to collect data for at least a 9 weeks.
Anecdotals.
That's correct.
Anecdotals. Well, you see, the point that I wanted to amplify again, and I've said this a half dozen times, you have to look at intervention the same way you look at EC. It's the same rules. It's the same system. One's just paid for by the state, the other's paid for by federal. You can't refer an EC kid the first 9 weeks. Why would you think you could, for EC? For some reason, schools think because this is not federal, we can just make it up as we go, or we can do whatever we want to do. No, the same rules apply as EC. That's why I said you've got to look at it. We have to lump intervention with EC now because they have the same rules. It's just who's paying is the only difference. But that in terms of running the programs. Now, the big difference on the other end is who's responsible if things don't go well. You've got EC people, you've got your EC department chair, you've got compliance technician, you've got your Department of Exceptional Children's, you got an assistant superintendent or an executive director. They're responsible. But on the other end, if intervention goes bad, it's the principal. That's a school-based committee. I've made that point before. That's a school-based committee. You got to understand that you got to do the same stuff as the EC people, but you've got to do it and make sure it's being gotten done. For some reason, people think, well, if it's intervention, the EC people will catch that. No, they won't. They're not on their head count. That it's not going to happen. I don't know that folks in school realize what a undertaking and how much more work when we adopted MTSS statewide in North Carolina. I don't think people realized the magnitude of that. But they're finding out now. It's become a second job. It really has. That's a good catch, Mary. Robin Skinner has done her competency folio. Like Robin, she was with us last night, did a great job on that. Just want to remind you, you need to, as you're finishing up your OMA, you'll have your artifacts from that, and then you'll have the ones from the skip later. Make sure that you keep up with your competency folio. Sparkles in last night's group reminded us that IEP is a legal document. It's not a suggestion, or we'll get to it if we can. It's a legal contract, and you got to make sure you follow through on that. Leanne pointed out that progress monitoring, just like we're talking about anecdotals and progress monitoring and intervention, is the same for intervention as it is for EC. Got to do it. Let's see. Melissa in last night's group has a wonderful Title IX protocol from her district. Again, shifting gears on cyberbullying, Keisha pointed out that a parent report to school administration does affect the school environment, so you've got to deal with it. So the rule again on cyberbullying is if it affects the educational environment. Well, if a parent comes and makes a report to you, that means that the environment has been affected. You've got to follow through. Robin's got her task stream, OMA to task stream. Brenda said that in their district, if they had an issue of sexual harassment or sexual misconduct, that the school had to go back and review their measures. That's wonderful. Antecedent behaviors. Are you stopping the little things? Are teachers on their supervision? Are the doors being locked? Are they able to slip in classrooms? You got to review if you have any of those instances. I like that their school is doing that. Heather said that their district has designated an SRO and an IT person to handle Title IX reports and sexual harassment or sexual offense reports, that they have an SRO and an IT person immediately that's on it because they know that you need the IT. You need the policeman for the warrant powers, you need the IT person to open the phones and the devices. That's wonderful. And in and their policy says that everything must be thoroughly investigated before meeting with the parents. That means you don't call the parents in and warn them so they can go and hide all the stuff from their kids before the police. You got to get to the police, and that's another thing. I'm amazed at how many times people don't realize that if the word gets out, a lot of this stuff disappears. Title IX again starts with report to the proper authorities. You don't start the investigation. You report it to the police and your district authorities, and they'll tell you what to do now. Don't endanger or interfere with the appropriate authorities on these investigations. Melissa pointed out that discipline referrals, that's number 5, that teachers are emotional, they code things. I wanted to point out the law. Remember, we're working on arbitrary and capricious tonight. One of the things, due process. One of the things you can't do is put everything the kid's done since the beginning of time on referral. You can only refer them for what they've done now. You can't say, well, on Tuesday he did this, on Wednesday he did this, on Thursday. You can't do that. You can't add them all up so he can get more. You can't do that. And you got to get teachers to understand that they have to be realistic. Probably he didn't kill anybody. That they make it sound worse. But but due process, as we're going to work on tonight, starts with that written referral from the teacher. Let me say that again. Due process starts with the written referral from the teacher. Now, as we're going to talk about later tonight with our case, Bobby turned in his brother's, and I'm still going to argue that it's homework. And a good point was made last night that we'll talk about later, that if it's a 30-point assignment for the year, if it counts as a 30, then you would have had to done more guided practice, more, those kinds of things. Homework is when you send something home, there's no guided practice. It's complete independent practice at home. That can't count more than 10%. And I would argue that you shouldn't be sending on homework anyway, because that pretends that they have a safe place, quiet place, have the proper stuff. But a 30-point assignment should not be sent home. That needs to be monitored at school. That's why I've always argued this is homework. Where did he do it? At home. Well, that makes it homework. That's not an assignment. That's homework. That one to me is pretty simple. And then Olivia, there's my favorite. Olivia made a great point in her post about IEPs and EC. We need to talk about it for a minute. Thank you for this, Olivia. High school kids that show up on their own, what do? That happens regularly in high school. You got to know how to handle that. What if they're not 18 years old? Can you still hold the IEP meeting with them if they're less than 18 in high school? Yes, but you got to have what? Written permission from their parent, right? All right. But I've seen a lot of times say, well, the kid's here, the parent's not coming, and off they go. Well, did you have written permission from the parent? Well, no, the kid's right. If the kid is less than 18, it's okay in high school for them to attend without a parent if you have I want written permission from that parent. Okay? Now, here's the other part that nobody knows or recognizes, and this is kind of arcane. If the kid's 18, can his parent attend? Yeah, but again, you have to have written permission from a FERPA waiver from the kid. Because he's an adult now, and you're releasing his private information. So, in high school, it is okay for a high school kid to attend an IEP meeting without his parents. You have to have their written permission if he's less than 18. It is okay for a parent to attend the IEP meeting of a kid 18 or older, but you must have his written permission in order to do that. That's just a quirk in the law. You got to be very careful with that. You got to be very careful with that. And so thank you, Olivia, for pointing that out, that the rules are different in high school for EC than everybody else. And you got to know them. You need written. If a parent doesn't come to handle a kid 17 or under, you need written from a kid 18 or older to allow his parents to come. Either way, you got to have a written. So just make sure you know that. Because the very people that said, yeah, go ahead and do it, and then you don't have written permissions to want to sue you when they don't like what you know, the placement at the IAP meeting. They're the very ones that'll sue you. So, or you get into an issue where the kid that's 18, his parents come pitch a fit and want something he doesn't want, then you get sued because you let the parents in. You didn't have a FERPA waiver. You got to be careful with those. High school's just different. You just got to know that. And thank you for pointing that out, Olivia. We need to be reminded of that. One last thing. Macy from last night's group made this point. When we're talking about discipline, due process starts with a written referral. There's a process for due process. They get, to see the witnesses, they get to present their own witnesses, make a statement, all that. You got to investigate, takes time. But discipline in the end is really about holding the staff accountable. Let me say that again. Discipline in the end is really about holding the staff accountable to be not arbitrary. So again, when me and Sean are out back smoking, Lakeitha, don't send Sean back to the room and shoot me. You got to be consistent. You can't be arbitrary. You got to punish us both, and it's got to be consistent punishment. It can't be capricious too much, and you can't let some kids get away with stuff and not others. And then every time some kid does, sneezes, you write him up, and you write it up. Your staff's got to be consistent, and you've got to hold them accountable to make sure. Discipline starts with your staff, not with kids. It starts with your staff. I made that point. So that's good. All right. So tonight we're going to talk about due process. Now, this case tonight starts out with 115C288A. The principal has to grade and classify students. There's several other things. He makes the report to the superintendent. Just like the law says, the superintendent tells him just be careful. Superintendent can't tell him what to do. We know that state grading, homework can't count but 10% in aggregate for the grade. We know that this teacher did not. This is a disciplinary infraction. Cheating is in the state code. It's in that state manual. Cheating is one of the UB infractions that state doesn't allow in schools that they pay for. It's in your code of conduct for your district what the punishment is. A referral was not written, so due process did not happen. So let's pick it up from there. Who's going to be our first tonight to share their screen and present their case study?
My group want to go first?
Go. You're burning daylight on us here, Bill.
Go for
All
it, Bill.
right. I have it pulled up here. Y'all see that?
We can.
All right, so this is Dr. McRae, Dr. Williams, Miss Whitty, and myself. So when I read the case study, I found a lot of things, a lot of, and when we talked earlier, we all kind of agreed. We found a lot of pitfalls in stuff what was going on and what the principal should do. And what stuck out in my mind was that he was placing a lot of emphasis on who the father was. And and I came up with a course of action what he should do. We're gonna go one slide at a time. We're gonna alternate myself and Miss McCreary. Like we said, he needs to gather evidence and call the witnesses, talk to them, get everything, have a confidential meeting with the student. I mean, and take into account, like, is this the first time that this student has been accused of this or did this? Is it a pattern? Has it happened for other people? What was the result? Is it other athletes and stuff like that? And then give the student a chance to explain his or her actions. And just kind of keep notes on it.
We've kind of jumped in at the middle here. What didn't happen to start this case?
It wasn't referred.
Wasn't referred. So the first thing the principal needs to do is go to the teacher and say, where's the referral? That should be your first course of action. Now you got to be careful. Again, due process has to be, here's the substance, here's the procedure. Principal just can't jump in without a referral. The law is very clear. There must be any disciplinary action starts with a written referral from the teacher. And so the question here is why didn't the teacher write a referral? Now, when it gets to the principal's office, when you find out, you say, you got to send me a referral. And then when we get there, that's where we would start with this. But this is not a principal problem. I'm going to say this again. This is not a principal problem. This is not a superintendent problem. This is a teacher problem. We'll get to the superintendent problem next time in a couple of principals. This is teacher only. The principal did not have any wrongdoing in this case. None. His behavior was above reproach. But he can't just go diving in without a written referral. He's got to go to the teacher and say, no, you can't fail this kid for cheating. Where's his referral? Now, once you have the referral and you say, no, we're not giving the principal says, no, I grade and classify pupils. There is no failing grade. You've got to write me a referral for cheating, and we'll start from there. The teacher cannot assign a final grade. Principal can only one that can do that. That's off the table. You go tell the teacher, that's off the table. You don't have the authority to do that. I need a written referral from you on the cheating. That's how this case has got to start by law. That's due process. Then we gather the evidence, call the witnesses, let the kid make a statement. Now, you got to be careful on this prior stuff as well. You can factor that into the disciplinary decision, but not the finding of guilt or innocence. You say, well, Dale, what's the difference? There's a big difference. You shouldn't be looking for prior instances until you've decided whether he did it or not. That's part of due process as well. You can't let his past influence your decision making on whether he's guilty or not. That part can only come in at the sentencing phase when you decide what his consequence is. That can't be part of the determination of guilt or innocence. That's very clear in due process. You can't bring his past in on him until you get to the point where you're going to pass his consequence to him. That can't be factored in to whether or not he's guilty or innocent. You got to be careful about bringing in prior stuff. This is not the point to bring in prior. This is too early for that. We got to allow him to explain his actions, gather witness statements, have him write them. We got to have a referral from a teacher. That's due process. Now, again, we will eventually get to prior instances at consequence time, but not in the deciding part of whether he's guilty or not. All right, please continue.
All right, well, I kind of missed that part. But Jeanette, you want to take this one?
Sure.
I don't know where it is. It's here. There we go.
You should, did you download the PowerPoint, Bill?
It's here. Let me see. Yeah, I got it here. The slides are here. I'm just not sure why it's not.
It needs to be downloaded, not in your email. It'll freeze.
All right. Get back.
I have it open, Bill. I'll share my screen.
Thank you,
Okay.
Whitney.
My bad.
You're good.
Do I need to close this?
Yeah, you need to stop your share so Whitney can share hers. There you go.
It's loading. I mean, it's up, but the sharing is taking a minute.
All right.
Well, I think I'm having the same problem you did, Mary. My computer updated and now I'm having to go back in and allow all these different preferences.
Okay, let me see if I can bring it up.
Worst case scenario, I can bring it up.
There we go.
Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. On this particular slide, it says that we understand and follow school policy using due process. And was the due process, was it substantive or procedural? One of the things that actually stand out was that the handbook stated that as part of the school policy, to maintain standard of personal honesty, cheating of any kind may require a failing grade by the teacher.
All right,
So
let's
that
stop
kinda
right
got-
there. Let's stop right there.
Mhm.
Does that mean he could fail for the year?
No.
No.
It means he can only fail the assignment. So what it means is you can go one of two ways here. You can just give him, he can fail the assignment, or you can do a disciplinary action with him, like in school suspension. Can you do both?
No.
No. You got to pick one or the other. But that may fail means the assignment. Why can't it mean for the year? Because that would be zero tolerance.
Correct.
That's a violation of federal law. You can't say, if you do this, we put you out for a year with no due process. That violates federal law. Can't do that. So we start out with, we have a referral. That starts due process. Now the substance of due process is we got to get a written referral. We've got to call witnesses, take the kid's statement, do all those things that we have to do. Now, the procedural part, that's substantive. Don't put a T in that, substantive. Procedural is, did we follow that process? This kid never even got a referral, much less anything else. We zero toleranced him out of school for a year. It can't get any worse than that, folks. There was no due process of any kind because it never even started. There was no referral. Teacher can't put a kid out for a year. A teacher doesn't assign a final grade. The yearly grade. Now, that was, that's federal law being broke. Equal protection under the law. State law is homework can't count more than 10% for the whole year. Can't count more than 50% of the grade. Lord, the state test doesn't count but 30. So what we have to know is, what is the procedure? What's the substance? Yes, they are fair. They've been developed, due process, but the issue is not the substance. The issue is the procedure. Did we follow the procedure we were supposed to? And the answer is we didn't even start it, much less follow it. We didn't even start it. There's zero due process in this whole case. None. You can't argue that it was flawed or that it was bad or incomplete. There was none. It didn't even start. Until a written referral comes, you have not started anything. And what happened is the teacher wants to put the kid out for a whole year. No due process, no nothing, zero tolerance, manipulating a complete illegal manipulation of the state grading policy adopted by the local board. That's where we are. And you're exactly right here to make sure that, I mean, due process is in place to protect students. All right, move on.
Okay, next slide. And I
Right.
also want to point out that I personally thought that the 50% of the final grade was a little bit too much.
A
And
little bit too much.
well, I know because at my school it's only 20% for, a project, but this one, 50% of the final grade.
Again, be very careful here. This is not a project. This is homework. A project would require monitoring at school, guided practice. An assignment or a project is done in school, might be done partly. This was an out of school project. By state law, that defines it as homework, not project, not assignment. We're very clear in that. If it's done at home, it's homework. Now, if you went to court over this and you tried to argue that this wasn't a project or an assignment, they'd laugh you out of court. Reasonable person standard. Where do you do it? We do it at home. Well, then that's the definition of homework, stuff that you take home to do. There would have to be progress monitoring. There'd have to be guided practice. It'd have to be teacher input for an assignment or a project at school. I mean, all those pieces would have to be there. We don't just tell kids to, we don't just walk in the room and say, here, do this project.
Right.
And then, and at the end of the year, we look it up and see if they did it or not. I mean, that's not teaching. So by the letter of the law, this one's pretty simple. This is homework. And that's 10% aggregate for the year.
Okay.
That's all the homework for the year can only count 10%.
So, Dr. Lamb, I'm just kind of figuring, why wasn't this particular grading system caught by the principal?
It's not the grading system. She just manipulated.
She did that.
This is a teacher problem. We have a teacher work day at the beginning of the year where we're required to cover the staff handbook, which includes the grading policy. Don't let teachers, work in their rooms that day. Bring them together. You are required by law, North and South Carolina, to go over all the rules, the staff handbook. It has the district adopted grading policy in it. It has the code of conduct. It has the duty roster. It has the supervision schedule. It has the master schedule. How all those things are in there. Again, this is not a principal problem. Just because, don't think for a minute because adults know better, they'll do better, or because they know the rules that they will follow them. Your job is to monitor the adults, not the kids. The adults do what they want to do if you let them. Just like I said before we started, discipline starts with teachers, not kids. Are they where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be? Are they on their duty? Are they supervising? Are they writing referrals equitably across the people in their room? Are they letting some get away with some things and others not? I mean, discipline starts with it. So now in high school, because we had semesters, in high school, that half-day work day that we had at the semester break, again, and especially with all the turnover in schools now, you need to make sure that you cover that handbook again. But it's required for you to cover that. So don't think that they didn't have a grading policy in place. They have to. The district has to adopt one. They have to adopt the code of conduct. Otherwise, the state won't send their money every month.
Gotcha.
Remember, the state sends you your money if you send them their data every month. If you have to adopt all these policies, you have to have school improvement plans. You have to have all the things the state says that in law that you have to have. Somebody at the central office, me being when I was a low-level central office, like an executive director, I had to send that stuff. And then, I had to send disciplinary data, I had to send suspension, all that data. Otherwise, they wouldn't send you your money every month. They don't give you all, again, remember how schools are funded. They don't send you all the money up front. They send it in monthly installments. What do you got to give them before they give you your money? You got to give them the data that they want. You've got to send, your school improvement plans. You've got to send your master schedules. You've got to send all these things have to go in. It's right there in the faculty handbook. There's a required work day where that is required, that is covered in your school. So teachers know. Now, to think that, I'm not foolish enough to think because you told them they'll do it, and certainly you aren't. Just because you tell them, that doesn't mean they'll do it. the whole point is you have to hold them accountable. Your job is formative assessment of the adults, not the kids, to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it, being where they're supposed to be, doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's what they hired you for, to make sure law and policy is carried out. That's your number one job as a principal, to make sure law and policy has been carried out.
Next slide.
All right. Right. I got this. And I thought that and staff should be involved. And once again, I wrote this without the assuming there was a referral, even though there wasn't, but I'll go on with it. Get other administrators, just anybody involved that is like high level or whatever that they trust and have just pretty much CYA on this, like have someone like in the meeting with you, just like when you're a teacher and you have a parent teacher conference. I always like to have another, or even with conference with another student, if the room is empty, I like to have another teacher in the room. They don't really need to participate, they're kind of just there as a witness. And just pretty much just document everything and just like get like he got with the superintendent. The superintendent
He made
says,
the report as required by law. Certain acts had to be reported to the superintendent. He did that. Superintendent did his job and told him just be careful, which is all he can tell him. But you
Right.
told me now, I'm aware. Now, when you get the referral from the teacher, you go back and tell the teacher, I need a referral on this. It's very important in due process that how you would normally handle this, if it's, you know, assistant principal by alphabet or grade level, or if it's you at principal, that you don't deviate from your normal procedure in processing this due process, this disciplinary incident. If you've got if he's in the 8th grade and you've got an 8th grade AP that normally handles discipline, that's who would handle this. You can't switch up your procedure on this. You have to establish a procedure. If you're, if you're a singleton principal and you don't have an AP, then you normally process discipline, then you would do that. If it's by alphabet, then ever how you would normally do that, you have to have an established pattern. That's why a lot of times you see, on websites that says assistant principal for this grade or that grade. That's a legal thing. That means that they're responsible for due process for those kids in that grade level. In places where you only have one AP, they are the person responsible for discipline. And then the appeal comes to any decision made at the school level. You like an AP to do it first, because then they can appeal to the principal, and then to the superintendent, and then to the board, then they can go to court. That's the way it works. But it's always best, whatever your normal procedure is, again, whatever your normal due process procedure is, that you maintain it. You don't change it up. You don't say, well, this one's highly sensitive, I'm going to do something different on this one. Then you violated the rights of the other people. Did you give everybody that same courtesy? You have to be the same every time, regardless of who the kid is or what the charge is. You have a procedure that you follow every time. That's procedural due process. And part of that is if he's in the 8th grade, then the 8th grade AP handles this disciplinary case, gets the referral, gets the witnesses, has the kid in, does all those things. You don't just, you don't, as principal, overrule that and start with you, because again, you didn't do that for other kids. You didn't give them that benefit. You got to be consistent in your discipline, and teachers have to be consistent in their referral writing, and have to be consistent in the rules that they enforce. Not for some and not for others. You have to be very consistent all throughout. That's what due process is. Here's what you're supposed to do. That's the substantive part. Procedure is, did we follow that every time the same way for everybody? That's the only way it's equitable.
All right, next slide.
Meet with the parents. We should schedule a meeting and make sure that the administrator is there as a witness. offer the facts objectively while explaining the school policy. And hopefully the parents and the administrator can actually come together and have an intelligent, honest discussion about the situation. And hopefully they can come to a consensus of actually, well, it would probably be left up to the principal what the action should be with this situation. And next slide.
Okay. So this one I got into the arbitrary and capricious on the next couple slides. Is this basically it boils down to when they come to a decision on the consequences. I mean, this can't, you gotta leave your ego and your feelings at the door, like they say. Like consistency is gonna be the key, because no matter how fair you make it or you think it's gonna be viewed differently from the person getting the consequences. And if you have precedent in place, like tangible evidence, like paper trail, or just a history of these decisions, the same things, then you pretty much you have a good case to go forward with it. Based on the school policy, was there a precedent set, and is it objectively fair? Meaning that did you base your decision on pure facts, or did you base it on like fear or retribution or whatnot? That's basically what arbitrary is. Did you just say, well, this kid, I don't like this kid's dad, I'm gonna punish this kid? Or I play golf with this kid's dad, and you know, my son's on a baseball team, he's good friends with him, maybe I'll give him a break this time. That would not be that would be arbitrary. That would be, it works both ways. So basically, basically the thing is precedent. And if there is no precedent, then you got to rely on policy and set a precedent. And that's what I was going there for that one. Next one.
All right. According to the state manual that we referred to, I told you was your Bible, is cheating a state disciplinary infraction? Yes.
For the North Carolina Athletics, yeah.
No, is cheating from your disciplinary data manual, is cheating a disciplinary infraction? Yes. All right. Now, according to the manual, and then, okay, now it doesn't set the consequence. It just says this, we don't allow this in schools that we pay for. Your local code of conduct adopted by your Board of Education sets the penalty for all these infractions. There's a range. Now, this is best practice. Don't give the least, don't give the most. Try to stay toward the middle. And here's another thing in terms of consequences. Don't give an educational punishment for a disciplinary infraction. Would you give this kid a 0? Absolutely not. That's going to be hard to defend in court. When the parent takes this all the way up the chain, he committed a disciplinary infraction according to your own manual, the state manual and the local board policy. He committed a disciplinary infraction. Why did you give him an academic penalty? That encourages, you know, that failing grades, school to prison pipeline, you know, all of that argument. So the appropriate thing to do here would be to give him 1 day of in-school suspension. And while he's in school, what would you expect him to do? Make up that assignment.
Make that, all right.
Or give
Make
him
up that assignment. You got to be very, very careful. But again, falls under the category, just because you can doesn't mean you should. I'm telling you, because I've had to sit in court too many times. It does not play well in juvenile court to give a kid an academic punishment for a disciplinary infraction. You generally lose those cases in court. I'll just tell you right now before you go.
As a coach, I coach middle school basketball girls, and we've had this came into play this year. The girl pretty much got caught doing almost the same thing. It was an assignment, and it was something that her brother had done 2 years ago. He kept, and she brought it in, and the teacher didn't. I forget exactly what, she was a 6th grade student, but the teacher came to me and said she went to the admin's not gonna do anything.
Should have said, too bad, so sad.
And
Appreciate
I was
you.
like, well, I have an academic policy on my
You
team as well.
shouldn't. That's not legal. That's capricious. Can't do that. The referral goes to the administration. If they choose to do, if they just choose to give the kid a warning or whatever, you should not, as a coach, get involved in this. That's illegal. I'll just tell you right now. Nowhere in the High School Athletic Association manual does it say that you can give out punishment for behavioral consequences. I've got a copy of that manual in here.
Well, what I was saying is that eventually it got around, and the girl received a day of ISS. And
that's what the manual says she was supposed to get.
Well, she got that, and then when it came back to me, she wasn't really gonna play, but I benched her for the next game for the first half.
You can't be doing that.
Well, I didn't tell her that was a bench, but I can play anybody I want.
Yeah, but you got to be careful about that. I'm just telling you now, you got to be careful about that. Extracurricular activities are a privilege. Now, if the kid is suspended from school, they can't participate. But up to that, you can't limit their participation. Now, if you're the coach but again, don't be punishing kids without telling them why. You'd have to say, I'm doing this. Well, you don't have any grounds to be able to keep the kid on. And if she's just not good enough, if she's, small and, small, but she is slow and she can't play. Now that's one thing, but teachers can't come to coaches and start requesting punishment because they don't like what the administration did. That's a bad thing for a coach. You lose your house over that. I'm gonna tell you right now. That's not part of due process to go to a coach and ask for a disciplinary consequence. That is not part of due process. Can't be done. Shouldn't be done. And while we're on athletics, the athletic piece is in here just to kind of throw you off. Now, the kid, the High School Athletic Association for middle school and high school tells you exactly how many games a kid can play, how many hours or minutes a week they can practice, all those things. And so the kid, if the kid couldn't do his work because of athletics, that was probably because of travel ball. You have no control over that, but your coaches are being monitored in terms of participation, how many games a week they play, how many minutes they practice. This is not an athletic issue. And again, teachers can't go to coaches and expect disciplinary consequences. That is outside of due process. That's an automatic loser in court. I'll just tell you that right now. That's an automatic loser in court. The only time that kids get punished athletically is they are not allowed to participate while suspended from school. You can't participate in any school activities that's what suspended means. Other than that, no, they shouldn't be coming to you. You should not be hearing that conversation from them. You love you, mean it, but I can't be hearing this. You're jeopardizing my employment now. If you don't like what the administration did, you need to talk with them about that. I am not your relief. You cannot get into that, period. No exceptions, no caveats, no discipline from coaches, period. All right, move on.
Is the decision appreciated? So what I have in this particular slide is that the principal should always make a decision based on the best interest of the student. So with that being said, even though Bobby should get a consequence, but nevertheless, I feel, my personal opinion, that he should not be receiving a failing grade for that particular assignment.
No. Again, this is a disciplinary incident. There's no doubt about that. It's right in the state manual. It's right in your code of conduct. You don't need to be given an academic punishment for a disciplinary incident. Again, that steps outside of the bounds of it's questionable due process, but it's definitely a loser in court. Definitely a loser in court. All right, move
Next
on.
slide.
Yeah, document everything. I like that.
Yeah, document everything. That's, I mean, that's just common sense, really, but you'd be surprised. I had a case when I taught fifth grade about 6 years ago. I'm eighth grade now. We used educator's handbook for discipline issues for referrals, and I had my principal was kind of like she wanted to not renew me, but a situation came up when I had some referrals, and the superintendent actually called me in with the principal saying, why is all this going on? I said, well, I have all these referrals, and the superintendent actually said, according to educator's handbook, you only had like 3 or 4 referrals, and I actually had like 30. Everything little thing, minor, major, but I had printed them all out. It turns out my principal had gone in and deleted them all before the meeting out of educator's handbook, but I had that proof, and that kind of saved my job at that point. So that's why when I say document everything, just do it. And then finally, like, show support, offer support for the student, because they are ultimately kids. They're allowed to make mistakes. I mean,
Yeah.
so I mean, you may not, I mean, it may be a little tough love, but I mean, it shouldn't define them as a student. You gotta look beyond that. I mean, you do the same thing again. It was a choice, as I always tell my
Well,
players.
you know, we talked last night. Everybody needs a little grace every now and then, and you know, we call it restorative practices for schools for kids. You're trying again. You give the kid a day of ISS. You have him work on the project in ISS. We don't want to punish a kid academically ever, because that never ends well. Never ends well for the kid or for the school to be punishing kids. The whole point of school is learning. And we never want to do that. I mean, in a case like this, you're trying to take a whole year of this kid's career away. A teacher's trying to do that. It's about other than sexual or physical abuse, that's the worst thing a teacher can do. And so, and breaking federal and state law and local policy to do it. So that, you know, when we get to the end tonight, we'll talk about what we're going to do about the teacher. All right, moving on.
That's something.
Okay, I think Mary and Whitney will do the next exercise.
I think this is still mine.
This is ours?
Yeah, this is the last one.
Okay. So what I have for this one is that the principal making a decision, it must be made, and it definitely have to keep the student in mind, because you definitely want to give them the best interest. Even though Bobby was never interviewed by the principal, so his due process was never given to him. So I think as a professional and as an administrator, we definitely got to know the laws and the policies that governs these type of situations. And I think that the teacher definitely needs some professional development. And personally, I don't know whether I would trust her. Probably would put her on an action plan or something to make sure that she understands the implications that she actually, you know, brought the student to. So I would definitely put her on an action plan, monitor her. And because if she probably did it to this student, she probably did it to others. So
Well, the issue always is, and why I love this case is Bobby's, you know, Bobby's an affluent kid in the school. What are teachers like this doing to kids that don't have an advocate, don't have a voice, who aren't affluent?
right.
The poor and kids of color generally is what, and that's what the California Dropout Project talks about. That's the best research in the world on dropouts. And it talks about kids failing grades, you know, doing academic punishments. It's the school to prison pipeline. That's what we're talking about here. The irony of this case is this is an affluent kid, but think about this: is if, you know, a teacher like this, if she would do this to a kid like this, what would you do to a kid who is less than in terms of his social status? And that's our problem in schools, is we have teachers who target kids, who do illegal or unethical things to kids. All right. And again, athletes shouldn't be given preferential treatment. We understand that. Fair and consistent. You can't be arbitrary or capricious. And then The high school athletic handbook doesn't talk about behavior. It talks about practice time. And just make sure that your athletic director, middle or high school, is monitoring coaches to make sure that they aren't putting an undue burden on a kid's time where they can't do their work. All right, moving on.
Well, that was just mine. Whitney or Mary, do you have access to your slides now?
Yeah,
I thought
I
I had
do.
them all. I thought I had them all together, but they're not.
I have it.
All right.
All right, I'll stop sharing.
Well,
While we're waiting,
okay.
let's say you're going to suspend a star athlete and he gets in trouble on Thursday and the ball game's on Friday night. Can you wait to Monday to start his suspension so he can play on Friday night?
No.
No. No. All right. That's a high school question. All right, let's do an elementary question. Can you call the parents to come get a kid and say, I'm just putting him out for the rest of the day as a therapeutic suspension? Or therapeutic suspensions and we're not going to put him in the system. We're not going to do that. Can you do that and not put him in power school? No, can't do that either. What about the old faithful standby of ABC? Y'all probably not even old enough to remember ABC. ABC was back in the day, we used ABC, absence before conference. What that means was we'd send a kid home and say, you're not suspended, but you can't come back until you bring a parent. Is that legal? That would be no. Those are the three most common things that we do to try to skirt the rules in schools. High schools try to delay suspensions for star athletes, not legal. Sending elementary kids home with their parents, calling it a therapeutic suspension and not putting it in power school, illegal. Doing the ABC, where you send a kid home with a note and say you can't come back until mama comes with you, all three illegal. Can't do any of those three. I know they were at one time common practice, might be in some more rural places now. All three of those are illegal. Don't do them. All right, we ready for ethics now? Here we go.
All right. So, the first part of it is asking, is there a law, right, or policy appropriate for the situation? And in this case, yes, the school handbook stated that cheating of any kind may require a failing grade by the teacher. However, the handbook did not specify or specifically state a failing grade for the whole course or the whole assignment, which gives Principal Davison leeway in determining what would be fair for that student, whether it would be the whole assignment, which is not fair, or just that one piece of the assignment. And then to continue on with that, the interviews were only a piece of that whole project, as they called it in the book. It wasn't the entire project. So if the teacher was going to give Bobby a 0 for cheating, it should only be on the interview portion of the project, not the entire thing. Because the entire project was not plagiarized, only that portion of it with the interviews.
Now, this is where you got to work with your teachers and tell them when you have an incident of cheating, it's in the code of conduct, it's a disciplinary infraction, write a referral. Don't start taking points off, or don't start splitting the baby here, Occam's razor. Don't be doing those kinds of things. You have to establish a policy in your school, which you're well within your rights to do as a principal, that if it's a disciplinary infraction, we handle it as a disciplinary infraction. We don't do academic punishments in our school. You have to establish that. Now, teachers will fight you tooth and nail on that because they like to get after kids. But if you think about it for a minute, if you know if you go to court you're going to lose on that, why would you let teachers do that? Cheating is in the handbook. Cheating is in the state manual as a disciplinary infraction. It's in your local board of Education passed code of conduct in terms of what the consequences are. It's a disciplinary infraction. If you go to court and you took out and you gave an academic punishment, it's not going to be supported in court, because guess what they're going to do? They're going to get the state manual and your local code of conduct, and they're going to say, we don't see anywhere in here it's okay to give the kid a failing grade on an assignment. That's not in any of this. Right, here's what he did. It says here's the range that you could do with him. This is not in that range. That's being arbitrary. You picked something that wasn't there. You can only do what's in the handbook. So you got to be careful about this. And so that's why I said, as a principal, you've got to put your foot down and say, that cheating is a disciplinary infraction. You write a referral, we'll handle it from there. Period. We'll handle it from there. Don't be doing academic punishments. We can't justify that when we get sued. And it's going to be a we. All right. But your ethics of justice are correct. Arbitrary and capricious. All right.
All right. So for arbitrary and capricious, is the conduct is willful and unreasonable actions without consideration or regards to the fact or the circumstances.
Mhm.
What we concluded is that Bobby did plagiarize, or if he would have plagiarized the entire assignment, maybe given a 0 would have been warranted, but because it was not the entire project, we do feel like the punishment is really, really harsh. So that is very capricious. So we thought that that was not fair. Like Whitley just said, if it was a portion of the assignment, then that portion given a 0 or an opportunity to do it over, if possible, but not to give him a 0 or to fail him for the entire assignment because of this one portion, which it clearly states that this is only a part of the assignment. You can go to the next slide. As far as ethics of care, who will benefit from the decision, who will be hurt by the decision, and what are the long-term effects? Well, the only person that we feel at this point will be benefiting from the decision is the teacher, simply because she wants it to go the way that she wants it to go, because she feels that that punishment is deemed for that offense. However, who will be hurt by the situation is definitely Bobby. Simply because Bobby has not been given the option of due process, like was said earlier. He is being punished to the max. He's being punished as if it's 0 tolerance, as opposed to being punished for the actual offense. What are the long-term effects? Well, it's many long-term effects. It could be that the students that does the same thing that Bobby has done in the future will get the same offense or get the same punishment. It could be that Bobby will miss out on scholarship opportunities, because it could clearly states that there will be scouts at this particular game that's going to be there looking for scholarship options for these students. We did try to look at the fact that this is Bobby's uncle is a part of the what was it called, this county council. Not that that has a say in the punishment or the crime, but at the same time, sometimes word of mouth does hinder a lot that happens within the school and within the school districts. And then you're looking at these as potential stakeholders to support the decisions that are made within the school. However, so the teacher automatically assumes that there is some type of loyalty from the principal, in which she stated that I expect you to stand up behind this or to support my decision in what am I doing with Bobby's punishment. But in hindsight, it is just not the right punishment for this type of offense.
Teachers need to be giving out punishments. Are they authorized legally to be giving out punishments? No.
Oh.
It's not part of due process. Now, that doesn't mean they won't ask you to do that. And that doesn't mean that some people don't do that, but there's nowhere in law where it says teachers give out punishments. That's administrative. That's the right of the administrator. All right, move on.
Want to go ahead, Whitney? Go ahead, that's fine.
Okay. We also said Principal Davison did not meet with Bobby to get
Why
his side.
didn't he though? Was there a
Because
referral
the teacher
written?
did write it up.
Written,
There you
right.
go. Again, this is not a principal problem. I'm not going, I can't tell you that enough. Principals don't just pull kids at random and start processing discipline. If there's no referral, he wasn't supposed to be meeting with him. There was no referral for a disciplinary incident. This is a disciplinary incident. So this is not a Principal Davidson problem.
But we said that Bobby would be hurt by the decision as he would have to attend summer school and he wouldn't be able to play baseball. And like Mary has said already, other students could be hurt by this if, with Principal Davison allowing the teacher to implement this for Bobby, she could do it for other kids as well.
We said that the punishment from the teacher shows her need for power.
Mm-hmm.
The teacher is an action taking teacher as opposed to looking at the actual consequences around it. She's more likely to take action as opposed to just analyzing the entire situation to see what's the best plausible solution. Also, we said,
Sorry.
that's okay. It's one more. Oh, it's for the extra, okay. So then we said that this decision, this punishment was not in the best interest of the student, of course. Dictatorship was from the principal and the teacher, meaning the teacher expected the principal to uphold a decision that she knew or that we knew that is not the correct decision, and she's adamant about it. So we're looking at it more as a dictatorship, meaning this is what she wants, and it doesn't matter what the crime warrants or the punishment warrants, as opposed to a democracy to say, okay, let's sit down at the table and let's look at the facts and determine how we're going to punish the student according to the facts that was presented. We feel like they did not exercise the students' right, and there was, of course, no due process. And was that it, Whitney?
That's it.
Yeah.
All right. If you'll stop your share, good job. All right. Let me share my screen right quick. Who has the duty and power according to the law to grade and classify pupils? Duties and powers of the principal, right? Teacher can't assign the final grade. All right. Even no matter what. All right. Who has the legal authority to discipline students? Why would we have teachers thinking they can meter out discipline to kids to start with? Both of these are within the legal purview of the school principal only. Teachers cannot be punishing kids. They can't be processing discipline. They have to, their role and their role only is to write referrals on violations of the code of conduct in their school. They don't grade and classify. They don't discipline kids, period. And again, you will lose in court if you try to give an academic punishment for a disciplinary infraction. That's being capricious. When you go to court, the reasonable person standard kicks in, and that's not reasonable. That's not part of due process. You've got to know the law. Teachers don't do discipline. They don't give final grades. Both of these are in the principal's purview. The teacher attempted to do both. She had no legal standing to do either. She had to break federal, state law, and local board policy to attempt to do this. There is no letting this go through. That would not be an option for the principal to let this go through and support her publicly and then tell her in private, don't do this again. There is no option to do that.
Dr. Lamb, what happens when your school have a behavior modification coach?
Again, they're a coach. They are not an administrator. Now, the principal may have delegated the authority to them, but the principal has to answer for what they do. That appeal comes to the principal, and the principal's decision eventually is the school's decision, and that can get appealed to the superintendent, and the superintendent's decision can get appealed by the parent to the board, and the board's decision can get appealed to court, to civil court. So if you've got a BMT out handing out punishment, you better make sure that they're following the rules and that you're the one signing off on it. They can't just be giving them out themselves. It has to go through due process. Has to go through due process. Let me share my screen again. When we get to, let me move this out of the way. When we get to, you can do it. 6, 7. All right. So if we look at the disciplinary, this is what the state says is not allowable in their schools. Falsification of information. Right there. Can't happen at your school. Now, you say, but it doesn't give a punishment for that. Nope, it doesn't. So what you have to do then is this a disciplinary infraction? Absolutely it is. You have to go to your local code of conduct adopted by your board, required for them to get their money every month. Misrepresentation, false information, cheating, honor code, level 1. Right there it is. Level 1. In the manual, we go to level 1. What's the most you can do and the least you can do? Parent contact, conference, referral to student services, verbal warning, social restriction. So I said I wouldn't do the least, the verbal warning. In-school suspension is the most. 1 day, that's the most you can give. Didn't say anything in here about failing a grade or a course or any of that. This is a disciplinary. This is disciplinary. And who makes the decision on the grade? The principal does. Who processes discipline? The principal does, not the teacher. You have to be very careful about that. The only thing about eligibility is the 8-semester rule. But the only other thing is if a kid is suspended from school, they can't participate in any school activities. There is no coach can punish them, not according to the handbook, and nothing in the high school athletic handbook. So that's why I said, better not be stepping outside the law. The teacher's only role in the case like this, the only role, is to write a referral, send it down to the office, and that's it. Period. They have no other legal standing in this other than to start the process by writing the referral. Period. This is solely a teacher problem, but this happens every day in schools. And it's all, again, as I always say, it's all fun and games. So you get your eye put out until somebody sues you. And then this is a complete loser in court. This is a complete loser in court. I'll just tell you right now, a complete loser. Doing anything other than writing a referral, giving the kid 1 day of ISS to let him make up the assignment, anything other than that, it's a completely trying to go athletics, teacher giving a punishment. That's not, The person who makes the charge can't be the one that makes the finding of guilt or innocence and gives the punishment. That's not due process. The teacher is not a neutral observer in this case, and that's supposed to be the administrative role. That's part of due process. Can't allow that to happen. All right, next group.
We can go next. My
All
group.
righty.
Let me share. If I can figure out how to.
Click the slideshow button. There you go.
Yes, thanks, Jessica. Okay, so hey, you guys.
Hey.
So we're going to talk about case study 1 with cheating strikeout Bobby with myself, Leslie Norman, Jessica, Lakeitha, and then Lillian. So Jessica's going to start us off.
All right, so the problem that we have here is the case study that we've all read, that Bobby claims he didn't have enough time to complete the assignment, probably because of the busy schedule with the school baseball team. And then we're going to weigh into the ethical dilemmas of the assignment being weighed over half the grade, which we all have established that it's a homework assignment. It should not be weighed that. And then you have Bobby's uncle, which is kind of part of the issue, but not 100%. And then you have the without a referral from the teacher, you have the anticipation of the failing grade that's going to keep Bobby from his summer baseball tournament, which is going to weigh into the due process. So when we go over this, we're going to go into the deep dive of the principal course of action. Why did the teacher fail Bobby to give a referral? And then we're going to address both of the due process. We're going to go into the ethical paradigms, and then we're going to go into the course of action of what the principal should be doing and make sure that there is a fair due process in this case.
So a little bit of information that we already know about due process. These are steps that are taken to ensure an outcome that results from fair treatment of the parties that are involved. Substantive, we're looking at rules and policy. It must be fair and of themselves. And if it's procedural, we're looking at rules, policies, and regulations, and that is carried out in a fair manner. We're going to look at maintaining consistency. We're looking at the principal must be act fair and reasonable. The principal's educational need for the student. Also the benefit of the school culture and climate, and that the principal supports the teachers as well.
So next, we're going to go into the multiple ethical paradigms, the 4 as it relates to the case of Bobby, as well as maybe how it doesn't relate to the case. So the first one that we're talking about is justice. So that's whether it's fair, the equity, the standard, is it arbitrary or capricious? Like we've discussed, having the grade weighted so heavily is just capricious. It shouldn't have weighed that much of where it is going to affect his whole grade. Something that I used a lot when I was going through these ethical paragraphs was looking at page 155 of chapter 6. Just when it's talking about the principal getting involved and his right versus right dilemma that he could face when he's going through this. Next, we were going through care. So talking about the concern and connection, the relationship piece. So one thing that our group really thought about in this was the relationship aspect of how this would impact the teacher and the student's relationship, the teacher to the principal's relationship regarding what consequence or what decision would be made after that. And then exactly how that connection would be mended. Lakeitha, during our meetings that we've gone through discussing this case, actually shared a story about her daughter and her teacher that I actually wanted to pivot that she could share regarding care.
Okay, so my daughter was in 7th grade this past year, AIG cluster, and she and the teacher had conflict all year about just her overall participation. She was a great participant, but she had a voice of her own. She took a test at the end, passed the test with flying colors, and decided that she would help another student. This student was highly likely not to pass, so she decided to help him out. The teacher got upset and, of course, called me and gave us some consequences and decided to, instead of allowing her to retake, which was the suggestion that he made, he gave her a 0 on the assignment and also made sure that she did not make an A out of the class, which of course she's been on an A on the road probably since 3rd grade. And as a parent, I shared with them I knew my rights, so I could have taken it to the principal, but I also talked to my daughter about her consequences and the fact that she chose to help out another student that didn't even have the potential to pass, just to get under the skin of the teacher. And so we did take the 0, which of course she ended up with all A's and 1 B.
All right, so I want to pause this here for 2 things. If you'll stop your share, I want while we're here. We keep talking around this. We need. What is procedural? What is substantive due process? What are they supposed to get? Yeah, it's supposed to be fair and unbiased and all that, but what is it? Well, right here, if you look under week 7, I've got it for you. This is what substantive due process kids are supposed to get. Must be announced in the disciplinary data manual and district code of conduct. You saw me just refer to those 2 items right there.
Yes.
The infraction must be in the state manual, but this is a disciplinary infraction, and it must be addressed in your code of conduct with a range of punishment consequences. That's first thing. Right to be informed of the charges against you. That's the written referral from the teacher. That has to be in place. Right to hear the evidence, the witnesses against you. The right to respond to charges and give your side of the story and provide a written statement. A right to present your own witnesses. And then the right to not be treated arbitrarily or capriciously. That is substantive due process. That's what you're supposed to do, the substance. Now, procedurally, none of that happened. Is what we're talking about. There was no due process of any kind. It wasn't bad. It was non-existent here. That's totally on the teacher for not writing the referral and getting this thing started, because this cheating is in the manual, both manuals. Not allowed to do that. Supposed to write a referral, inform the charges against you. That's the written charges. Can the principal write a referral? No. Teacher has to write the referral. That's what starts the whole process. And when that's done, they're done. They have no other standing in the case. Who does the law say grades and classifies pupils? Who does the law say processes or signs discipline to kids? Not the teacher. Not the teacher. They have no standing in this. And lastly, oh, this is going to make people mad. That's kind of what I do for a living now. Nowhere in 115C288 does it say that the principal is required to support teachers. That's not your job description. But teachers think it is. Again, Hannah Maraglia went in for the interview for principal fellow at UNC Charlotte, and she said, I want to be a champion for teachers. not on our dime, you're not. No, didn't get it. And she was a star. She got it the next year. They let her come back. But she had learned by then. Nowhere in the law does it say you're supposed to be a champion for teachers. Nowhere in the law does it say principal's job is to support teachers, period. No, that's not your job. You must be a champion for students, not for teachers. I don't know why teachers expect people to support them when they're wrong, unethically, or ethically wrong, or legally wrong. You're putting your house at jeopardy now when you do things like that. Your job is not to be a champion for teachers. Nowhere in the law does it say that. I'm not saying we be mean to teachers or we don't like them, but that's not our job. That's not what the law says that we're supposed to do. But teachers will argue you down to the nth degree that that's principal's job. That's to support teachers. No, it's not. It's nowhere in the law. You will find it nowhere in law or policy. Nowhere. Because it's not there. You got to dissuade yourself of that notion right now that's what you're doing, or that's what you're supposed to do, or that's the role of school administration to support teachers. It is not. It's to support kids. If we can support teachers while doing that, that's a twofer. We've done a good job. We've had a good day. But there is no decision if there's a choice between them and teachers, kids and teachers. There is none. You are legally bound to take care of kids. That is in the law. And so this notion that, we want to make sure we support our teachers. No, we don't. No, we don't. That's you got to get that notion out of your head tonight. That's not your job. You have to be an independent arbiter of the facts. You have to make sure due process is held. No referral, no due process. And again, even if there had been due process, you can't break the law to do it. You can't break federal law. You can't break state law. There is no debate whether the 50% is too little or too much or appropriate. It's not legal to make it anything more than 10%. There's no debate on that. Well, I think 50% was too much. You don't get to think. This ain't a thinking thing. What was that Trace Atkins song? This ain't a thinking thing, it's a drinking thing. This is a legal thing. This ain't a thinking thing. If it's more than 10, it's against the law. Period. Your job is to do what? Uphold law and policy. Period. That's what principals are supposed to do, not support teachers. They're supposed to uphold law and policy. If you counted it more than 10%, then you broke the law. If you put a kid out for the year and didn't give him any due process, that's zero tolerance in the eyes of the federal government. That's against the law. Can't do that kind of stuff. Most of this stuff is just pretty black and white. Now, the athletics about, took too much time. As long as your athletic director is monitoring the amount of games that they play and the amount of practice that they have, which is spelled out to the minute in the High School Athletic Handbook Association, that doesn't enter into it. Whose Bobby's parents are doesn't enter into it. We have to stick straight to law and policy here, and not this notion that teachers have that number one job for principals support teachers. Not in the law, not even close. All right, back to the presentation.
It's coming up. Okay, and then we were talking about critique. So we mentioned the powers that the teacher had, and that she was exemplifying when she did apply this grade or this punishment, she said, to the child. As we discussed, she didn't have that power. And then I think that last group mentioned the dictatorship that she was really placing over just wanting to instill that power over the student. Something that me and Lakeitha also hounded in talking about this, especially when it mentioned human rights and social class, were the difference between having someone advocate for you versus maybe if you work at a Title I school, as me and Lakeitha, and a lot of the kids don't have someone to advocate for them, or that may have caught this punishment that was exemplified on this child. So that's when we really started to mention Bobby's uncle being brought into the conversation, just when the principal was discussing it. And then it's like, oh, well, hey, remember who his uncle is, as that could, or if that had anything to do with the decision being swayed in either direction. So that's something that we really wanted to hound in on, and how that social status of the child can affect a consequence being put upon them, or even it just sticking.
That's correct. That would be, if you factor in the parents, the baseball, social class status, that would be arbitrary. That's against the law. You can't bring that in any way. The superintendent said, politically sensitive, be careful. Now, he didn't say, do this because of his uncle or whatever. He just told him you need to be careful, document, make sure that you have followed the law, whatever it is. And that's the only advice that you give. When they used to call me, that's exactly what I'd tell them. Have you called the police? Yeah. Well, we want to report this to you. Okay. And I would tell them, I'm not going to tell you what punishment to give or any of those things. I'm going to tell you to make sure you follow due process. And make sure that you've done all the things, that you crossed your T's and dotted your I's. Make sure you've done that. You've notified me now. Thank you for that. That's in the law. I'm now aware. On disciplinary things, if it's an act of crime or violence, did you call the police first? Well, it's just cheating. Well, then you're supposed to call me first. Thank you for that. And I'm just cautioning you to make sure you follow the handbooks. And I just say, follow the handbooks, whatever that is, and make sure you've done your due process. But again, we can't, as Leslie said, we can't be factoring in these other things, because if we do, then we know certain kids are going to get the short end of the stick, and that would be arbitrary. Some justice for some and not for others. That's what we're talking about here.
And then next we move lastly into profession, where they were talking about considering and evaluate the potential moral and legal consequences in decision making, working for the best interest of the students, which should be the job of, like we mentioned earlier, the principal and both the teacher. So just the principal, he's brought into this as he's supposed to act as like a fair and reasonable party, as he to be handling the discipline of it, the grading of it. And the teacher, as we see, kind of dropped the ball in, locating or thinking about the best interest of the students, or even just being reflective in her own practice. Like we said, if she's done this once and it seems that she handed this punishment out with ease, she's to kids before that just weren't caught. They didn't necessarily have anything that was an effect after it. They kind of just had to take the grade of what it is. So we mentioned the community effect of that. Myself personally, I am the athletic director at my middle school. So I am in charge of actually monitoring the students, monitoring my coaches, making sure that games aren't placed back to back, that practices aren't too heavy of a load. Just checking in with the kids to say, just, hey, is practice too much?
Yes.
The coach does have a lot of leeway kind of in like when practice is, how many minutes you can have it, but still just wanting to check in with your actual, let's say your actual, the word is slipping my mind, your customers, the actual customers that we do have, seeing how they are affected by this. And now in athletics, we're actually taking away from the term of hardships to looking at something that's a little bit more futurized thinking, especially when we're talking about those lifelong consequences that, say, a punishment like this could have on a child. So we don't know how his behavior is or anything like that, but we see that if he gets a 0 on this, he'll go ahead and fail that class. He'll have to go to summer school. So now he's missing out on the baseball tournament. This may lead him into behavior issues next time. He may fall into behavioral issues just in class, maybe something different than how his personality was shown prior to this incident happening. So just wanting to be reflective in that process. And then we also mentioned just how we wanted the principal to kind of just know what was going on in his classroom. Like we said, we know that most districts have certain grading policies that you have to follow. Even your statewide, is legal or illegal to have certain numbers, but just not even knowing that your teacher was placing something like this on the entire class. He wasn't just the only student that had this said homework assignment that he just so happened to cheat on. Everybody still, if everybody would have cheated, that would have been, it looks like a whole class that would have been failing their grade. So just knowing also what's going on inside of your actual classroom, so that hopefully this doesn't continue to happen in the school.
All right. So the issue, of course, is will cheating strike Bobby out? Ultimately, we've talked about this already with the first group, and Dr. Lam has mentioned before, these are the principal duties in the 115C. Ultimately, it is the job of the principal in this case study. Of course, it's the principal's duty to grade and classify students by determining the appropriate grade, thinking about that based on that classwork and grades, test scores, and the best educational interests of the student. It's also the principal's job to improve instruction and community spirit. And then thirdly, of course, if we've been reiterating, is it's the principal's job to discipline students and assign duties to teachers with regard to discipline and with the general well-being of students in mind. So of course, that means no shock the conscience. That's unreasonable. We've talked about that already with capricious and arbitrary. So what should the principal do? So this moves us into some possible solutions. So we think about, based on all the things that my team talked about, we discussed, we propose the following. Number one, of course, it's the principal's duty to ensure due process with the referral, as we've already stated. So with that, the student, he's ultimately going to assign that grade, as well as make sure the grading policy for his school is fair and is understood, and is followed by his teachers. So with that, we talked about a meeting could be held with the teacher, the parents, and the student to determine the most appropriate plan of action based on the consideration of all the factors. So looking at his grades, all the things. We talked about possibly an alternate assignment or redoing the assignment with a hard due date attached for the student. And then there could also potentially be a meeting to repair the relationship, the harm that was done between the teacher and the student with restorative practices. So that potential impact. Thank you. So when we talk about the potential impact after those possible solutions, of course, the community and stakeholder disapproval and the pushback, that's where the uncle comes in at with the money for the booster club and all that stuff, supporting the school. I mean, that could be a big pushback that could, I mean, it could potentially harm the school and dwindle down into academics because of so much money being funded in those programs that really support students. So also we talked about, of course, the teacher-student relationships being harmed. That could bring a negative school climate, which negative school climate ultimately also affects academics, which is not the best interest of the student. Possibly revision of the school grading policy.
That's
So
a
if
no.
he,
That's a no.
well, I say that in a way that if it wasn't understood properly by the teacher,
No,
just
now see, you're recommending something that's illegal there. You can't do that. Revisit the school grading policy. Schools don't have the authority nor the principals to set grading policy. Who sets the policy to start with? The State Board of Education, and it's adopted by the local Board of Education. Schools cannot revise the grading policy, period. Can't discuss it, can't revise it. Now, what you can do is revisit to make sure they know it and that you're enforcing it, but you can't revise it. That's not in your legal purview to do that.
Gotcha.
You got to remember, we do law and policy in this course, and so schools do not have a seat at the table on policy revision on grading.
Right. So then we would revisit the school grading policy.
Yeah, revisit. That's the term.
Revisit. Yes, sir. Revisit. So that goes into inspecting what you expect. So that's the responsibility of the principal. So we could revisit that. And of course, with revisiting the grading policy, that impact is definitely the responsibility of the principal to make sure the teachers are following the policy.
That is
so
correct.
That's doing, fidelity checks of grade books, all those things. And then another possible impact could be less cheating and more accountability of student work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
Great job. I'm always amazed at how punitive teachers want to be. And if you let teachers, some of them take kids out back and shoot them. I'm serious. I'm amazed by that. How angry they are at kids sometimes. I'm also amazed how little grace that we want to give. We ran into a situation a few years back. I was chair of the Ed Policy and Standards Committee at the college, and one of the things that came up was the 75% attendance rule for undergraduate students at Gardner-Webb. And the Dean of Student Success came and said, "We've got a problem. Kids are meeting the 75% attendance threshold for the 3-day-a-week classes for undergraduates. That's 45 classes. But because teachers are taking off points for each absence, a kid can meet the attendance threshold, but still fail the class, regardless of their grade." And they fought tooth and nail to maintain that in the policy. And I said, "Boy, you're going to get killed in court doing stuff like this." Nowhere in the policies that say that you can take points off for not attending class. You got to quit doing that. But that's what we're talking about here. But again, State Board of Education in North and South Carolina sets the grading policy. They set they they set the percentages and they give you some leeway, and then your local board adopts that. And then that's handed out to schools. It's in that teacher handbook for those work days. And that's why I said I would revisit it middle of the year anyway. But you're exactly right. You got to be knowing what's going on in the room. Leanne's exactly right to know, are they abusing this policy? That their grade book is exactly as it's supposed to be. We can set, and it's not anybody's opinion. We can set and total up the grades and divide them, and here's what they make. You know, students ask me sometime, how come we have to put something, you know, we have to put our whole OMA in, we have to put all the tasks in, we have to put them in for review. Well, that's in order to get enough points up to make sure that I have the percentages right on the weight of the things that go on in class. But I want, you know, 60% of your grade has to be your two evidence, is 30 and 30. In order to do that, I have to have you put them in multiple times in order to get those percentages out of them. Because it can't be that I count, you know, those are two important things, but I can't count them 100%. They count 30 each for a total of 60, and then your assignments and your case studies. I mean, you know, there is a method to this madness. And so at the end, if Roger says, I got a B and I think I deserve an A, we just go and look at the points. It's pretty easy, isn't it? Grading shouldn't be, you shouldn't have to take your shoes off and get a calculator to try to figure up the numbers. I mean, grading's supposed to be pretty easy. The problem comes in when you start trying to manipulate it. The problem comes in if we think that we can change the grading policy for the district, or we set little traps up, or we do things, disingenuous things, you know, in order, we set up way too many points on something that we know kids are not going to be successful on. It's amazing to me how devious teachers can be sometimes. When they have an agenda. And that's what, you know, again, teachers don't do discipline. You can't let them get into discipline business, because that's completely arbitrary. It's also going to be capricious. The person, due process says the person that starts the process, that writes the disciplinary referral, can be the one that does the investigation. Can't be. That's not part of due process. And so we have to be careful. And again, our job is not to support teachers, to support kids and make sure that we're carrying out policy. And again, schools don't make policy. They don't revise policy. They only carry them out. And that's our job. We can revisit it, but we can't revise it. We have to be very careful in that language. These are the kinds of questions that you're going to get asked in assistant principal interviews, by the way. This is exactly the kind of stuff that they're going to ask you. If there's a law or policy, would you support it even though you didn't like it? Well, yeah. These are the kinds of things. You know, is your job to support teachers or kids? This is the kind of stuff they're going to ask you. You know, if it paid exactly the same, do you want to work with kids or do you want to work with teachers? If you don't say teachers, they'll let you stay working with kids. That's what we're talking about. These are the kinds of questions that this is exactly the stuff that you're going to be asked in the interview process. You got to know this stuff. You've got to know that you can't change policy. That's not within your purview. You got to know that kind of stuff. Teachers can't do discipline. You have to, you know, teachers can't assign final grades. That would all be you. You got to know what your job is, and they got to know that they can trust. Again, just like, you know, in the first season of Andy Griffith, when Andy had to go to Raleigh, he left Barney in charge. First thing Barney did was deputize Otis a town drunk and gave Gomer a gun. I mean, they got to know that you're going to follow the policy and you're not going to do crazy stuff. That's what they're looking for. But you're going to make rational, you know, that you're not going to have them in court doing something crazy. You know, doing something illegal, supporting teachers no matter what they do. That's a fool's errand just to say, I'm going to support teachers no matter what. Now, I might tell them privately to do better or whatever, but I'm going to support them. No, you're not. No, you're not. We don't want to stay in court all the time. We'd like to have a day every now and then that we don't have to go to court because we've done something dumb. That's the whole notion here. All right, we got another presentation.
I thought I'd put my hand up this time because I didn't get over to
Go,
the
Roger, go.
mic.
I thought band directors were more vocal than this.
Oh, I'm very vocal, yes. I just like listening to you, good sir.
Listen at him over here polishing the teacher's apple. Nobody likes to listen to me. I'm this crazy old man standing out in the yard ranting at clouds. Nobody wants to hear me. All right, here we go.
All right, I am sharing my screen now. All right, we are Team OSR. We're doing case study number 1. Today is June the 12th, and it's well after 6 p.m. My team members are Olivia, Sean, and myself. All right, so I was supposed to talk about whose problem this was and how should this process of investigation start or begin. But we've talked about that several times. We understand that this is a problem that is the teachers.
Yeah.
And in our discussion last night, we all decided that, hey, this should have never even gotten to the principal. So I kind of want to ask a question or two before we actually get into the meat of what we want to do. And if you guys can just talk to me for a minute. What other resources do you think that the teacher could have used to help her with this issue, or that she may have had that she did not realize before she even took it to the principal?
Well, she had 2 options.
Her teams.
She had 2 options. What she could have done is said, this is a disciplinary infraction, wrote the referral, sent it to the principal, and then that's the end of it for her. Or she could have said, I want to do something restorative with you, Bobby. I want to give you the opportunity to redo this assignment, and not made it a disciplinary issue, made it one of a learning restorative thing, one or the other. Either, but she can't give a punishment, is what I'm saying. She's not allowed to give a punishment. She's not a school administrator. She can work with the kid to redo the assignment. She could do that, or she can make a referral. But that's her only 2 options. She doesn't have the option to do punishment here or do consequences. That's not, teachers aren't allowed to do that by law. That's only an administrator can do that. So she had 2 options. The best option, and Roger's exactly right, the best option would have been to do something restorative with the kid. This is your brother's. Let's do something on your own. Let me help you. Let me redirect you to do something. We want you to get the learning from this. It's not about the grade. It's not about turning in a piece of paper. It's about the learning that would have occurred had you done this. Let's help you do that. She could approach it from that end, or she could have made a discipline referral, but that's her only 2 options. There is no third here.
So I look at it a little further, and being from a teacher, looking at a teacher's lens, if you have done this project 3 years in a row, and you know that this is the same project that has been floating around the school year after year after year after year, why not revamp the project?
You could expect that to get, exactly right. Why do you think we use Turnitin?
Right.
Because we have a state blueprint, and everybody has to do the same projects until the blueprint changes, probably this fall, for the new ones coming in. And until the new blueprint comes in, everybody has to do the same thing. So we do Turnitin. That's why we have to do it. We're required to do that because the state's not going to change their blueprint. But Mary's exactly right. After you run the thing one time, and the second time you run it, somebody's going to turn in one from the first time. Change the project up. That would be helpful too on that end of it, on that. But once the kid has done this, you've got 2 options. But Mary's right. You could have probably avoided this by changing the assignment.
I also think that I don't know if it's a third option, but in trying to be restorative, right, with the child, we always talk about resetting every day, and we're talking about changing the behavior and building. From the story, I do not get the idea that this was a child that had behavior issues, right? I kind of get like, they pretty much participated in class just this one time. They didn't have time to do the assignment, and maybe they cheated. I wonder how could the teacher had reached out to the uncle to support her in this situation?
Well, that's what I mean. We're going to find a way for you to make up the work, and that would have involved the parent and the kid. We're going to give you the opportunity to make this up. This is a teachable moment. That's what restorative. We used to call them teachable moments. Now we call it restorative practices. We have to change the name on everything to make it sound new or better or smarter. But this is what we used to call a teachable moment, where we could work with this kid to get a different outcome. and not in a disciplinary sense, but in an educational sense. We wanted a different outcome involving the parent in that. In that restorative practice, whatever it is, yes, that's part of the restorative practice. But we'd say the important part of this assignment was the learning that came from it, not the grade or the paper that you turned in. That's what we need to happen here. That
Exactly.
You know, that's the teachable moment here, or what we now call the restorative practice. And those are pretty much interchangeable.
We looked at the topic of the assignment, which was basically to, look at historians or community members and interview them. And then we found the connection. His uncle was a council member, also on the Board of Education. So this was a great connection to make right there.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You could involve them in that restorative practice, right? There you go. And that's what, if the teacher was going to handle it herself, she can't handle it as a disciplinary incident. She has to handle it as an academic one, and that would be restorative practice.
I'll toss 2 cents on that one. I mean, not that the fact that the uncle is a board member or whatever matters. That's the superintendent's problem.
Yeah, exactly. And that's above your pay grade.
But I like Roger's solution of, if you can involve the uncle in the corrections problem, you make your principal look good, you make your superintendent look good. Everybody wins on this one. And that's the challenge in this scenario.
That's the whole notion of a teachable moment or restorative practice, is that everybody wins.
My last question, until I turn over to my colleagues here. So we understand that the assignment or the grading of the assignment might not have been fair because he failed the entire class, right?
Right.
So as a principal, what should I do here? Because what if that is the only assignment that I do? And
all you do as a principal here is there's no failing grade. There's none of that, right? You tell the teacher, write a referral for what he did. And we will handle the disciplinary part of this, and we will tell you what the makeup will be on how to handle the grade. But you don't enter that grade in until we tell you what will happen in the adjudication of this case. Simply write the referral for what he did. He turned in his brother's homework assignment. You send us that referral, we'll handle it from there.
Well, my question was a little different than that. I'm wondering, like, if that one assignment can fail me, could that one assignment
that's a complete manipulation. That's what we're talking about. She just made that up.
I'm thinking,
that can't happen. This is a teacher manipulation. She broke the law to manipulate here. That can't happen. The most that could have counted, according to state law, is 10%. So to make it count more than 50, she just completely made that up. She pulled it out of the air or her behind or wherever. That's not legal. You can't just make it the rules as you go. The policy from the state of North Carolina says homework can only count 10% in aggregate for the whole year. So the teacher this is a teacher problem. She just made this whole thing up. She just said, I see the opportunity to get this kid and put him out of school for a year. I'm going to take it no matter what I have to do. She broke federal law, state law, local board policy. There is no 50, anything can count more than 50%. Hell, the state test can't count but 30. She just made it up and expected her to be supported. That's the thing I'm talking about. Your job is not to support teachers, especially when they just make something like to just pull this out of the air. I'm going to do this bad thing. I expect, and I've broken all these laws, but I expect you to support me anyway because I'm a teacher here and he's a kid. No, it's the other way around. I support him, not you. But so this can't happen. I mean, you can't allow this to happen because it's not legal. There can be no assignment worth more than 50% of this homework or otherwise in a school. That can't happen. Now, teachers may try to manipulate, but that's not part of the grading scheme. They are given the grading policy at the beginning of the year in their handbook. This is the grading policy right here. You can't deviate from that. You can't make your own. You can't decide that you don't like this one. This is the one you will follow. This is the only one we can legally defend. So you will follow it. It's not an opinion thing. It's not if you want to thing. This is what you will do. We have no role in making policy at the school level. None. Absolutely none. And that's why I jumped on that. You can't let teachers believe that they can decide to follow that or not. You cannot lead them to believe that or let them think that, even if you didn't tell them. You have to make it very clear. This is the policy. This is the supervision schedule. This is the duty roster. This is the master schedule. All these had to be filed and put away, and people come and check. We better be doing this stuff. If we get argued and any of this stuff is not being upheld as we filed it, that we would do these things, then we're all in trouble here, and it's mostly me. So you will follow these things. Here it is in your handbook. Here's the master schedule. Here's the duty roster. Here's the supervision schedule. Here's the grading policy. Here's the bell schedule. This is what we will do every day, all day. This is a legal document here. It's not up for your interpretation. This is what we do, period. That required work day is specifically for you to do that. This is the rules of how we will operate. This will keep us all legal and in our homes. This is the notion here. It's a legal contract. That handbook is a legal contract. And it has all the laws and policies that you will follow, period. You don't get to decide. You don't get to pick and choose. It ain't the McDonald's dollar menu. You can't get pick. This is what you do. You have to make that clear to teachers, especially nowadays when we have so many people who are coming in from outside who don't have any kind of formal teacher training. They think that this is just, the staff handbook is just a suggestion. No. This is a legal document. Remember when I told you at the beginning of the year, we'd learn how to make a legal master schedule, legal duty roster, and legal supervision schedule? They have to follow. We have laws and policies that we have to follow to make those. And again, the grading scale, we don't make that. It's handed to us by the board adopts the grading policy, and they hand it to us. Now, as principal, we might have some feedback on it, but probably not. But we definitely don't get to debate it or argue whether we're going to follow it or not. And so we have to be very careful in that we understand that. I mean, this person just made this stuff up. And you have to know that. And she's trying to buffalo you or trying to, intimidate you with going to the union. But she's got to don't have a leg to stand on with anybody. You've broken all these laws. These are not suggestions. They're laws.
Speaking of union, that's one of the one that jumped out to us when she shows up with her union rep. And first thing in that meeting, the union rep gets disinvited because there's a potential FERPA violation right there. We're not going to cross that bridge when the students come up and grade. And we're not talking that meeting that they had in the case study. That is not about the disciplinary action of the teacher. The teacher's due process isn't starting yet. That's something later.
She can bring her union rep later when we move to fire her. She can bring him then or her. But this is they have no standing in this case. If you let that union rep in, that's a FERPA violation for the kid. This is a child's disciplinary incident. The union rep has no standing in that, none. Now, if we move to fire the teacher, the union rep can show up.
And that's where that meeting that you're having with that teacher, that's where the focus needs to stay on. It needs to stay on what are we doing about the child? What is the educational outcome we want for this child? Ideally, when conducting the meeting, if it goes great, it's done in a collegial fashion. You lead the teacher to, you messed up, don't ever do this again, in a very polite manner. And she's on board, you roll on. If she's not, there's other actions. Talk about that in a minute. We've already talked about the discipline issue, and there's no need to go back and rehash that one. What I want to look at here is what are we doing moving forward? Okay, the milk's spilt right now. The teacher's going to readjust. The teacher is going to realign her grading policy with the district's don't care. Also, I want to know from the teacher is this your grading policy for this one student, or did you do this to the whole class? If you did it for the whole class in the high school type setting, did you do it for every section? And oh, by the way, you're going to go readjust for all the sections, don't care, and recalculate your grades and let me know what happened. That brings an interesting discussion in that not really, it's would be germane is what happens if students' grades start going down? That's another discussion to think about. Second thing here, we've talked about, sorry, the student's going to redo the assignment. In that meeting, we can decide what the assignment is going to be. If the teacher wants more time to think about the assignment, that's great. Go think about it. She can come back in and agreed upon amount of time, tell us what that assignment's going to be, but it's going to get a principal approval because she created this mess and I'm going to help her figure it out how to get out of it. The others, now more longer term corrective actions here. There's the dean of students in this case, or whoever the appropriate person is in your school. I would tag an assistant principal with this one. Get with our school. We have a registrar who can go through Power School and go, how sick are we? Is anyone else deviating from the board grading policy? If so, I want to know who. I want to know how big the problem is. Okay, then that's going to determine, are we going to have a big training session now on what grading policy should be, and then everybody's going to go fix it, and we're going to go verify it's fixed before moving forward, because this sounds like this is towards the end of the year before those final grades come out. And if there's more than it's the size, you get your hands around how big of it, and that makes a decision. You're doing a faculty-wide training now, or you're going to target a couple, say, hey, you're going to fix it, and you go get that fixed. The academic dishonesty policy. The teacher's going to get trained on it. Everybody needs to get trained on it. What are we doing? I think we've come to a consensus as a course here is that, well, you're not given a 0. So what is the standard answer for every single teacher, and make sure every single teacher understands standard answer. In the other aspect here is, okay, what are you going to do every single teacher if this happens in your course? So you're going to figure out what how are you going to recover the student? You're going to make that decision. You're going to inform leadership that this has happened. We need to decide as a team, a leadership team, do we want them all referring every single student for discipline, and this be a question we as a staff decide, as a leadership team, is this going to be discipline or is this going to be handled in academics? I tend to lean on if you got cheating going on, kick it up to the assistant principal, let the assistant principal call, give the teacher some plausible deniability, but at least go to the assistant principal with the plan. And the assistant principal can let the principal know, and then the principal can overrule if they need to or not. But we're all going to do the same thing. Teacher, reprimand or termination depends on, I think what we discussed in our meeting, depends on how long this teacher's been around. She knows she's been around 2 years, so is this a 2-year teacher who's gotten the bit in her mouth and is running, and you need to pull back in and potentially can fix? Or is this a teacher who's been around for a while, and or you've had other indications that this teacher does not have students' best interests in mind and needs to go away? At a bare minimum, whether a formal reprimand is coming or you're terminating, well, I shouldn't say you're terminating teacher, I'll cover that in a second. There's going to be some formal counseling. Now, before any of that happens, principal's got to talk to HR before you take any of those steps, so you respect the teacher's due process rights. But again, that's not the purpose of this case study, so I'm not running down that rabbit hole. The other thing I would do at the end of this, after this whole meeting with the teacher, hey, this is where we're going forward. Call the superintendent. Hey, boss, this is what we've done. This is what we're doing. Here's what I'm doing to get better, and move on with life, just so he knows what's coming. Due process. I'm not really sure there's more to add to the due process discussion other than the policy itself as we've talked about with respect to the law, sounds like a bad policy. I don't like the policy as it's written in the first place. I like the may. I don't like the fact that it's vague in where's the failing grade assigned. Is it the whole thing or is it just the assignment? And I think we all agree the whole thing, not the right answer.
No, that's federal law violation if it's the whole thing.
Absolutely. So the policy needs to be revisited. That's a conversation between the principal and the superintendent about overall school policy with regard to academic dishonesty, and that's got to be the same across all the schools. How that one's approached.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's a board deal.
Mm-hmm.
The superintendent is the secretary to the board, and that'd be something that you would recommend. Hey, we recommend you take a look at this. But the problem with that is the board wants some wiggle room. They're politicians. They depend on people to vote for them. They want some wiggle room. They intentionally wrote it that way, but you got to know what the law is and not fall in the trap. And you got to make sure that teachers don't use that language to do illegal things as well. I mean, yeah, there's going to be several things that come from your board of education, and when you're an administrator, you're like, what were they thinking? Why are they doing that? That gives people, it makes people think that they can do things like this. And if we made it black and white, they'd know they couldn't do things like that. They can't. They'll lose. But because they want to be wishy-washy, so they can swing either way, whichever way the wind is blowing. Now, you're not ever going to stop that in politicians, but you got to know that it can't mean that you can fail for the year, because because if it did, that would be a federal law violation. You have to know those things. But it looks good for the politicians, but in reality that it can't mean that. And that legally, if you go to court and you're giving out academic punishments for disciplinary infractions, that's not going to work well for you either. And so that's why, that falls under the category, just because you can doesn't mean you should. While you may give this kid a failing grade, if his parents sue you on this assignment, if his parents sue you, if they take it to the mat, and I've seen parents crazy enough to do that, when it goes to civil court, most of the time the board will reverse that decision, because they don't want to go to court, and they know that they're going to lose in court. And so the superintendent's going to whisper in their ear as secretary to the board, we got to amend this. We got to change this. That we go to court, we're going to lose on this one. And so normally by the time it gets there, the board will change the decision. But I'm like you. I wish that teachers or principals didn't have that choice. But unfortunately, a lot of times board members want those choices in, even though hoping that you won't pick that down the road, or if they get called to the carpet on it, they can always reverse it. Yeah. That's not a good way, but that's the political way that things happen, unfortunately, with elected officials.
I think arbitrary and capricious. We've squeezed all the blood out of that turnip.
Yeah, we're good.
And then I think that kicks it. Well, I would say there's some other questions to toss out, and then we'll kick it over to ethics. If this teacher's been around a long time, how long should be doing this great policy? How sick is the school? What do you need to do there? We'll talk about that. I think this was mentioned in the previous group. Looking at Bobby's demographic, and it doesn't matter with this case study or what other case study, how has this teacher treated Bobby's demographic in the past? That's another corrective action you may need to look at with this teacher, and that could go further. That could weigh into discipline versus termination as well decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's all. Okay, I've looked over all my notes. I turn it over to my colleague Olivia.
All right, Olivia.
Hey everybody. So I'm going to go over the 4 ethical paradigms, and the first one is justice. And of course, the grading policy was not fair because it counted too high of a percentage as a homework assignment. The discipline action is a discipline action for cheating. It should not be an academic punishment. The teacher needed to write a referral first, and the teacher took action first. And then there was no due process, which we've covered due process. There was no due process because the referral was never started. When we look at care, care towards the education of the student was not shown by the teacher because she should be putting the student's education first. And the teacher should not have given the punishment because she does not conduct discipline across the school. So she doesn't even know what other discipline students might receive. Of course, there was no referral, so the student did not have a chance to state his case. And then the best course of action would be having the student redo the assignment for a lesser grade or a lesser percentage, because that would meet the educational purpose of the assignment, which is what in reality we want the student to learn, and that is showing care towards their education. The critique, the punishment did not meet the action because this is I'm a high school teacher, students cheat frequently, or try to. So the punishment did not meet the action of copying the siblings' paper. Of course, the teacher was trying to show power by bringing in the union rep. She was trying to show power by giving discipline to that student. So she's a little power hungry. And then, of course, the social status of Bobby, or, Bobby's uncle. If it was somebody different, would they even try and change the failing grade or fight for it? I know some students at my school, they are in the mindset of it is what it is, so they wouldn't necessarily fight this battle, and so that is not fair for their education when the teacher was in the wrong. For professional, of course, everybody needs to be trained on the academic dishonesty policy, because if she is doing this and if she's a teacher trying to give out discipline or educational punishment for a discipline action, then we need to see what other staff members are doing this as well. As a professional or administration, they need to evaluate all teachers' grading for consistency with the policy. Like I said, if she's doing this, you never know who else is doing it. And if the problem is widespread, of course, they need to have a training. And then, like Sean had already mentioned, if there's any action against the teacher, she needs due process as well, and HR would need to be getting involved. I did bring up the school to prison pipeline because, of course, the school to prison pipeline is when school districts across the country give discipline policies that push students out of the classroom and into the criminal justice system. This usually happens with racial minorities and students with disabilities. So back to, if this teacher is doing this with Bobby, who has more of a social status, playing sports, and his uncle being on the school board, I'm sure she would be doing it to minorities and students with disabilities as well, because they're not going to be as likely to fight for themselves. And of course, the school to prison pipeline, the ways to fix this could be increasing the use of positive behavior interventions. So, of course, not even writing a referral for Bobby, just managing good classroom management and dealing with it within the classroom. And then, of course, the principal can train teachers on the use of positive behavior supports for students who are at risk, or students who if they have issues in their classroom, and if it's widespread, the principal could be training teachers on ways to handle that within the classroom, I think. And then we talked about zero tolerance. This is kind of a zero tolerance policy because she counted the assignment as a huge percentage where Bobby would end up failing the course, and she cannot have this zero tolerance policy because she's not over disciplined, and you should have zero tolerance policies for more issues within school safety, not issues like this.
Yeah, exactly. And even those have lost a lot in court. Even, even the zero tolerance on, you still get due process. You're supposed to get due process even if you bring a gun. You're still supposed to get due process. And zero tolerance means is that we put you out. You did this, you get that. There's no adjudication of you. And so they have found to be widely, they're just losers in court. I'll just tell you right now. If you don't due process the kid, and you're not going to win when you go to court. Zero tolerance is just a dumb idea to write it in handbooks or in anything where you're putting the kid out of school for a year for anything. You know, without any kind of due process, or without any allowing any mitigating factors. And that's part of due process is you do this, you get that. Even if you get due process, it doesn't matter, you get that. The law says there always has to be mitigating factors. Is it the first time? Is it the last time? Well, you know, those kinds of things have to be factored in. And in a case like this, obviously none of that happened.
And I think we are done, as long as nobody has any questions or comments.
Very good. Very good. What we got left? All right, we got one more presentation. Is everybody done tonight? Have we seen and heard from everybody? All right.
3 or 4. That's 12. We're good.
I was just making sure I didn't want to leave anybody out. I want everybody to get equal opportunity.
David is not here. I have the presentation, but I would have to do it all by myself. So you want me to go for it?
Just no. What I want you to do is tell us what your opinion is. What struck you about? I like this. What struck you about this case? What is your opinion and what is your perspective on this case?
My opinion is that the treatment was kind of harsh. I don't think a student grade should be valid on one assignment. I felt like she should have gave him an alternative instead of just failing him and then trying to send him to summer school on top of that.
Yeah.
That was our main discussion. It was too many fail and go to summer school all over one assignment.
Yeah.
So that was our discussion, that when we did our Zoom meet, that it was a lot going on. And then how you took it to the principal, and then they're worrying about who's involved and all that other stuff, which has nothing to do with the main issue. And that's the best interest of the student is to give him assignment, make it up so he can move on.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to make one final point. I know I've made it previously, but I want to remind you, for some reason, teachers and other folks think that if we offer an alternative to that, out of, failing for the year, like summer school or that year-long exclusion, like an alternative school placement for 90 days. But the federal law is clear. That does not abrogate the fact that you did a zero tolerance, that you offered an alternative of shorter duration like summer school or alternative school placement. You're still guilty of zero tolerance. And they write that out specifically, that, it's kind of like, see, what schools would do is we're going to do this real bad thing to your kid. And when you object, we'll let him do this if you won't complain. It's kind of like when you go to the doctor and he says, we're going to have to take your whole leg off. And you're like, oh my God. He said, no, I'm just going to have to take your little toe. Well, that's okay. That's what schools were doing a bait and switch. We're going to give you this tremendously overblown, capricious punishment so that you'll go along with this lesser punishment without getting due process. No. And that's why the federal government said no. It doesn't matter that you're offering them 30 days at Right Choices Alternative School. It doesn't matter that you're going to let them go to summer school for 4 to 6 weeks. You still zero toleranced them. You still broke federal law. You still violated the 14th Amendments and the Civil Rights Law of 65. You violated all of those things. Just because you offered a lesser punishment does not absolve you of your legal responsibility for having broke the law. So that bait and switch deal, give something real bad, then do something less bad. It's still bad. It's still illegal, according to the federal government. You can't be doing that kind of stuff. How many of you would move to fire the teacher, dismiss the teacher? How many, by show of hands? I'm gonna hold mine up. I know
she would definitely get a write-up. She would definitely have some
action. How many of you would put her on an action plan write-up?
Can I give a depends vote?
No.
Well, I think it does depend. I think it
No,
depends.
it doesn't
In your
depend.
opinion,
No,
in your
no,
opinion,
it
do
doesn't
you think the
depend. You got
teacher's
to make a
fixable?
decision. That depend is in your mind. What do you?
She'll get it right up.
Well, no, that's why I said it depends. It depends. Do I think the teacher's fixable? If I think she's fixable, we fix her. If I don't, in my opinion, if I don't think she can be trained to not do this again,
Sean,
she's gone.
I thought you were smarter than this. People aren't fixable. Do you know the business model of Lowe's and Home Depot? They depend on people way estimating their ability. That's why they sell to the home consumer that goes home and makes a mess and pays twice as much to have a professional come in and fix it. They watch the YouTube video and think they can lay tile. Oh my Lord.
Well,
people
I would,
always overestimate their abilities, and the corollary to that is leaders overestimate their ability to lead people to be able to change.
well, I would offer this one, and this comes from 20 years in the Navy. We had a job as leaders of the Navy. You had your sailors. You fixed them or you got rid of them. And could you fix some of them?
Is there ever anything that's bad enough that it's not about fixing them? Is this something that you would allow in your building? It's a yes or no. It's not about. My point was it's hard to fix people, and you never know if it's going to come out one way or the other. But in the end, what you have to be able to say as a school administrator is I will not allow this in my building. It's not about whether I can fix her or not.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree with that. That's holding a standard.
Yep.
It's
yes or no,
this
Bill.
person.
You think this person can reach? But on an action plan. John, excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think it comes out. Do you think that person can be corrected to the standard in the future? If it's a 2-year teacher, you can probably get them corrected to the standard in the future. They may not.
Is this
they may
egregious enough to let them go? Don't think about improving them. You're looking at it from the wrong angle here. Is what they done egregious enough to terminate them? I mean, if I came in and shot Jessica, well, you could rehabilitate me, but now is that something that you would allow in your building, me to shoot her? No. So you've got to look at it from the perspective of we have a standard in our building. Is this something that I'm going to allow? Is this crossed my personal line as a leader or not? Not now. If you say it has not, then it's can I fix her or not? But the issue here is, has this crossed your personal line or not? See, it's crossed mine. I'll just tell you, it's crossed my personal line. Now, I have more ego than all of y'all put together. I might think I can fix her, but now this has crossed my line. This is, again, to me, this is the most harm that you could try to do to a child, short of physical or sexual abuse, taking a whole year of a child's education away. I know what negative effects that crosses my line. It just does. But you've got to figure out what because here's what's going to happen, Sean. And I can show you this. One of the questions that gets asked a lot early on in the interviews, is there any beliefs that you have that you absolutely will hold to in terms of the standards of school that you will not compromise on? And if you say, no, I don't have any, I can compromise, then no, you will not get the job. So the notion here is does this violate that standard that you just won't back down from, that you just can't live with? Does it violate it or not? That's what you have to come to when you're talking about teachers is their behavior egregious enough that you can't live with it? I'm not saying you're a bad person if it's not. For me, it is. I know that there's a teacher shortage right now. It's not about can I improve her or not. It's about what she did, what she attempted to do to this kid. Can I live with that or not?
Well, I think you've got other problems you got to delve into that point. We used to have a saying, ensigns can make ensigns mistakes. Lieutenants can't make ensign mistakes.
Right.
So an ensign making an ensign mistake.
This is more than just a mistake. This is a moral issue to me.
Well,
it's beyond just the legalities. She broke all federal, state, and policy. But the moral imperative of leadership is that that you can't allow stuff like this to happen in your building. That's the moral imperative of leadership.
Well, I agree with that. I would offer as well. how experienced is this teacher and what's the culture in your building that would allow this to occur in a safe
that to
place?
me is immaterial. Is it, you know, a kid
Well, I
can
think
pull a
it's
trigger.
well,
You know,
okay, I can agree with that.
That's the problem here is in the end, has what this person done violated, you know, is it too far that you just can't allow this in your building or not? And you're going to have to be forced to make these kinds of decisions. And it should not, and here's where I'm headed with this. It should not be based on supply and demand of teachers. You cannot run your building and what's allowable and not allowable from the moral imperative that you have based on, well, I can't replace her. But it, you know, I'd rather be without than to have somebody that would do something like this to a child. I personally would rather do without. But everybody has to find that moral center that they have. You know that, but that's the leadership piece of this. In the end, is does this violate, you know, the moral imperative that you have in your building? You have to be that. That's how you lead, is with your moral imperative, folks. That servant leadership. But you can't allow. That's about being champions for kids. You know, there's certain things that are just beyond the pale. There's just too much. There's just too much. This is one of them for me. Physical abusing the kid, sexual abusing the kid, trying to take a whole year away from the kid. Now, after that, you know, that's my only three. I don't have anything beyond that. But those three things I just can't allow. I will not allow in school, period. Just won't. But again, everybody has that threshold. And that's part of this case is for you to have that conversation with yourself. What is my threshold? What is my moral imperative? It's not about your religion. It's not what we're talking about here. It's about that moral imperative, about what we're doing here. You got to find your level of comfort. You got to find your threshold. You know, that's what we're talking about with teachers. And what's happened is that's become very fluid in the shortage era here. And we can't let it be fluid. We can't allow that to influence how we allow kids to be treated in our buildings. We just can't. I implore you that we can't do that. I know that that's not a practical approach, but I implore you that we can't allow people to victimize children. We just can't. That's the antithesis of our job. All right, we're gonna get that back. Great day. We've gone along. I told you. We made up. I gave you a little time earlier. I told you this takes a while. This is a teacher problem, and because of that, it's a principal problem. And the whole idea here is you've got to figure out whether you can allow this to happen or not. And we can prove 7 ways to Sunday all the bad things she did. No referral, due process. She failed on every ethical standard. She broke federal, state, and local policy. I mean, this is a total wipeout. Everything you could do wrong, she did wrong. But in the end, this is really about what are you going to do? Does this violate your sensibilities? It's the only thing it stops short of is physical and sexual abuse, and we know that we can't allow that. But the issue here is what is your tolerance level? What can you do? If you approach this from a purely intellectual, I can fix this teacher, that's fine. But you know what is your personal standard? What won't you live with in your building? And that's what you've got to find. All right. I've had the time of my life. I've never felt this way before. I swear it's the truth. And I owe it all to you. Anybody know the reference there? Olivia does.
Say it one more time.
That's from Dirty Dancing. That's the song from Dirty Dancing at the end when they dance at the end.
I've had the time
right
of
out
my
here
life.
at the beach right here. I'm at the resort tonight at Rumlin Ball. They filmed that scene right out here on the beach. Song.
I'm not gonna sing it though, but I know what it is.
You know,
I'll try, but not on a recording.
Have you searched through every open door?
Yep, that's it. Bill's got it. All right, I'll see y'all next week. I appreciate you. Y'all did a great job. Give yourself a hand.
Oh wait,
Good night.
Hey, Dr. Lamb, got a quick question for you.
All right, I'm gonna turn the